My name is Carol, I'm 62 years old, and on the eve of my only son's wedding, his fiancée told me I was being erased from the family. Before I tell you how my decision not to attend her wedding led to the exposure of a massive financial fraud that sent her family running from the state, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. It all started at the rehearsal dinner. The restaurant was one of those painfully trendy places in German Village, here in Columbus, with soft lighting and menus that didn't have dollar signs. Everyone was laughing, drinking expensive wine, celebrating my son Michael and his fiancée Tiffany. I tried to smile to join in, but a knot of anxiety had been tightening in my stomach all evening. After the main course, I saw my opening. I picked up the heavy leather-bound gift from the floor beside me. It was a photo album, the kind you can only make with your own two hands. I'd spent months on it, digging through dusty boxes in the attic, carefully selecting every picture that told the story of my son. His first steps, his first t-ball game, the gap-toothed grin on his face at his 8th birthday, and the proud, teary-eyed moment he graduated from law school at Ohio State. It was a mother's heart, bound in leather. I walked over to their table, my hands trembling just a little. "Michael, Tiffany," I said, my voice softer than I intended. "I made something for you both." Michael's face lit up. "Mom, you didn't have to." But Tiffany was faster. She stood up, smoothing down her silk dress, and took the album from me with a smile as thin as a razor's edge. "Oh, Carol," she cooed, her voice loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "How thoughtful." She didn't open it. She just held it, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the cover. Then, as Michael turned to thank his best man for a toast, she leaned in close. Her expensive perfume, something sharp and floral, filled my senses, making it hard to breathe. Her lips were almost touching my ear when she whispered, the words a stream of ice against my skin. "Thank you for raising him, Carol. You did your job." Her voice was sickly sweet, a complete contradiction to the coldness in her eyes. "But tomorrow your role is over. You are no longer part of this family. You're a piece of history." The air left my lungs. The happy chatter of the restaurant faded into a dull roar. I couldn't move. I just stared at her, at that perfect smiling mask. She wasn't finished. "Honestly," she continued, her whisper dropping even lower, "it would be better for everyone if you didn't even show up. It would save us all the embarrassment." It felt like a punch to the gut. Decades of sacrifice, working double shifts as a nurse after my husband passed, selling our family home to pay for his college fund, giving up every dream of my own to make his possible. All of it was just reduced to a job that was now finished. I was being discarded, like an old appliance. I don't remember saying goodbye. I don't remember walking past the smiling faces of my family and friends. All I remember is the sudden shock of the cool night air on my burning cheeks as I stumbled out onto the brick sidewalk. The beautiful album, my gift of love, was still in Tiffany's hands inside. Probably set aside and already forgotten. I made it to my car, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I gripped the steering wheel, the leather cold beneath my fingers, and the full weight of her words crashed down on me. "You are no longer part of this family." A single silent tear rolled down my cheek, then another. This wasn't just an insult. It was a declaration of war. She didn't just want me out of the way. She wanted me erased. In that moment, sitting alone in the dark parking lot, a lifetime of swallowing my pride, of being the quiet, supportive mother, came to a screeching halt. She wanted me to disappear. And as the engine turned over with a low rumble, a cold, hard decision began to form in the very pit of my soul. I stared at my own reflection in the rearview mirror, at the face of a woman who had given everything, and I knew with absolute certainty what I was about to do. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and tears. I don't think I've ever felt a coldness like that before. A chill that had nothing to do with the Ohio night air. It was a coldness deep in my bones. When I got home, I didn't turn on the lights. I just walked through the silent rooms of my small apartment, the place I'd moved to after selling our family home. I stopped in my bedroom and looked at the dress hanging on the closet door. It was a simple, elegant navy blue dress. The kind a proud mother wears to her only son's wedding. Seeing it hanging there, so full of hope, felt like a mockery. I sank onto the edge of my bed, and my mind drifted back. Back to when Michael was just 7. A little boy with scuffed knees and a world of questions in his big brown eyes. That was the year his father, my wonderful Mark, went to work one Tuesday morning and never came home. A sudden massive heart attack. The doctor said he didn't suffer. I think I took on all the suffering for him. One day I had a partner, a love, a man who could make me laugh just by the way he looked at me. The next I was a widow, a single mother. The funeral was a fog of casseroles and sympathetic whispers. After everyone left, it was just me and Michael in a house that suddenly felt cavernously empty. From that day on, my life had only one purpose, him. I was a nurse, and the salary from one job was never going to be enough. So I picked up a second one, waiting tables at a diner on the weekends. My days started at 5 a.m., getting Michael ready for school before my hospital shift, and they ended well past midnight, smelling of disinfectant and stale coffee. I remember nights when I was so exhausted, I'd fall asleep at the kitchen table while trying to help him with his math homework, my cheeks sticking to the vinyl tablecloth. But I never missed a parent-teacher conference. I never missed a single one of his baseball games, even if I had to beg another nurse to swap shifts. I was the mom in the stands cheering the loudest, the mom who always had orange slices and juice boxes ready. When it came time for college, the scholarships weren't enough. Not for a good school, not for the kind of future Mark and I had always dreamed of for him. So I made a choice. I put a for sale sign in the front yard of our little brick house, the one with the big oak tree Mark had planted the year Michael was born. I packed up 20 years of memories into cardboard boxes and sold the only real home I'd ever known. We moved into this small 2-bedroom apartment. The profit from the sale became his college fund. Friends told me I was crazy. "Carol, you have to think about your retirement," they'd say. "What about you?" But they didn't understand. There was no me without him. My retirement plan was seeing him walk across that stage, diploma in hand. My dream was his success. And when he not only graduated but got accepted into law school at Ohio State, I felt a joy so profound it was almost painful. I had done it. I had kept my silent promise to Mark. Our son was going to be okay. He was going to have a life full of possibilities. All those years, all those sacrifices, they weren't burdens. They were acts of love. Each long shift, each missed vacation, each cheap haircut I gave myself in the bathroom mirror, it was all woven into the fabric of the man he had become. A good man. A brilliant lawyer. And now this woman, this Tiffany, with her perfect clothes and her cruel whisper, had dismissed it all with a wave of her hand. "Your role is over." It wasn't just an insult, it was an attempt to invalidate my entire existence. She was trying to tell me that my life's greatest work, my son, was now her property, and I was just the leftover packaging to be thrown away. As I sat there in the dark, the navy blue dress a ghostly silhouette in the moonlight, I realized she had fundamentally misunderstood. I wasn't just a role. I am his mother. And that is a title you hold until your last breath. She had picked a fight with the wrong woman. She had no idea how strong a mother's love could be, or what I was capable of when the only thing I had left in the world was threatened. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind replayed the last 2 years like a horror movie I was forced to watch. The red flags were all there. I had just chosen to ignore them, painting them over with excuses because I so desperately wanted Michael to be happy. I remember the first time he brought Tiffany home for dinner. She walked into my small apartment, her eyes scanning everything, from my comfortable but worn-out armchair to the framed photos on the wall. She was beautiful, I couldn't deny that. Polished like a porcelain doll. She handed me a bottle of wine that probably cost more than my weekly grocery bill and said, "It's so cozy here, Carol." It wasn't a compliment. It was a judgment. Throughout the meal, she talked endlessly about her job in public relations, name-dropping clients and talking about promotional events in Chicago and New York. When I tried to share a funny story about Michael from when he was a kid, she'd give a tight little smile and say, "Oh, how sweet," before immediately changing the subject back to herself. It was clear she had no interest in the life he had before her. A few months later, for his birthday, I made my famous chicken pot pie. It was Michael's favorite dish, a comfort food he'd requested every year since he was 10. I spent all day on it, making the crust from scratch. When I brought it to the small party at their new, modern apartment, Tiffany took one look at it and laughed. "Oh, Carol, that's so rustic. We're trying to cut back on carbs." She then gestured to a spread of tiny, unidentifiable appetizers on the counter. "I had it catered." My pot pie sat untouched in the kitchen all night. Michael, trying to keep the peace, didn't even have a bite. It was a slow, steady campaign of subtle dismissals. For Christmas, she gave me a high-end gym membership. To help you stay active and take care of yourself, she'd said with a bright smile. The unspoken message was clear. You're old and out of shape. She'd correct my grammar in front of people, question my choice of clothes, and always find a way to make me feel small. Like I was a relic from a past he needed to move on from. But the incident that should have been the final alarm bell was her bachelorette party. Michael had mentioned she was planning a weekend trip to a spa with her friends. I naturally assumed I'd be invited. It's what you do. You invite the groom's mother. But the invitation never came. When I gently asked Michael about it, he looked uncomfortable. Oh, she said she mailed it, Mom. It must have gotten lost. He was a terrible liar. A week later, I was at the grocery store when I overheard a familiar high-pitched laugh. It was Tiffany on the phone with one of her bridesmaids, standing in the organic produce section. I ducked behind a display of avocados, my heart pounding. No, of course I didn't invite her, Tiffany was saying, her voice dripping with disdain. Can you imagine? A whole weekend with his dowdy mother? I had to cut the guest list down to just the essentials. No unnecessary baggage. My blood ran cold. Unnecessary baggage. The same theme from her whisper at the rehearsal dinner. I felt a hot flush of shame and anger creep up my neck. I abandoned my cart and walked out of the store, my eyes stinging. I should have told Michael then. I should have sat him down and told him exactly what I heard. But I didn't. Why? 'Cause I was afraid. Afraid he wouldn't believe me. Afraid he would choose her. Afraid that by trying to protect him, I would only push him further away, right into her perfectly manicured hands. So I said nothing. I swallowed the poison and pretended I was fine. I convinced myself that once they were married, things would settle down. She would feel more secure and maybe, just maybe, she would start to see me as family. Now, sitting in the pre-dawn darkness of his wedding day, I finally understood. It wasn't insecurity. It was a strategy. A calculated plan to isolate him from his past, from his roots, from me. She wasn't just marrying my son. She was orchestrating a hostile takeover of his life. And I had been her silent, unwitting accomplice. The guilt was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I had been so focused on his happiness that I had ignored the viper he was bringing into his life. The sun started to stream through my window, painting stripes of light across the floor. It was a beautiful day. A perfect day for a wedding. And I was sitting in my pajamas, feeling like the world was ending. At precisely 8 a.m., my phone began its relentless assault. The first was a text from my sister Sharon. Running late. See you at the church. Can't wait. XO. Then came the text from Michael. 8:30 a.m. Morning, Mom. Today's the day. See you soon. 9:15 a.m. Hey, leaving for the church now. Are you on your way? 9:45 a.m. Mom? Everything okay? People are starting to arrive. 10:05 a.m. Mom, please answer me. Where are you? The ceremony starts in 25 minutes. Each message was a fresh stab of guilt. I could picture him standing in the vestibule of that beautiful old church, his face etched with worry, checking his phone over and over. I was his only parent, his rock. And I wasn't there. The pain of deliberately letting him down was almost unbearable. I turned the phone off and threw it onto the couch. Just as I did, a furious pounding rattled my front door. It was Sharon, already dressed in her lavender mother of the bride-adjacent dress. Her face a storm of confusion and irritation. Carol, what on God's green earth are you doing? She demanded as soon as I opened the door. You're still in your robe. Michael's about to have a panic attack. The entire family is asking where you are. I couldn't speak. I just stepped back and let her in, the tears I'd been holding back finally spilling over. I collapsed onto my worn-out armchair, the one Tiffany had silently judged, and sobbed. Sharon's anger melted away, replaced by deep concern. She sat on the ottoman in front of me and took my hands. Honey, what is it? What happened? Through my tears, I managed to choke out the words Tiffany had whispered to me last night. She told me. She said after today, I'm no longer part of the family. She told me not to come. The color drained from Sharon's face. Her expression hardened into a mask of pure fury. "That little snake," she hissed. "She actually said that to your face?" I nodded, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. "She called me unnecessary baggage, Sharon. After everything." "I knew it," Sharon said, her voice low and dangerous. "I always knew there was something wrong with her. The way she looks right through you when you talk. Michael is blinded by her." She stood up, pacing my small living room. "Well, I'm not letting her get away with this. I'm going back to that church and I'm telling Michael exactly what she did." "No," I cried out, grabbing her arm. "Don't. It's his wedding day. You'll ruin it. It will just make me look like the jealous, interfering mother she wants everyone to think I am." She hesitated, torn. The sound of distant church bells began to drift through the open window. It was 10:30 a.m. The ceremony was starting. "You can't let her win, Carol," Sharon pleaded. "She's already won," I whispered, feeling utterly defeated. "Just go. Please. Be there for Michael. Just tell him I'm not feeling well." Sharon looked at me, her heart breaking for me, and finally, reluctantly, she agreed. She gave me a fierce hug and left, leaving me alone with the sound of the ticking clock and the wedding bells that marked the beginning of my son's new life. A life I was no longer a part of. For the next hour there was silence. Blessed, agonizing silence. I imagined the vows, the rings, the kiss. I imagined the applause as they walked down the aisle as husband and wife. I imagined my son, married to a woman who despised me. Just as the church bells were supposed to be ringing to announce the happy couple, my phone, which I'd forgotten Sharon had turned back on, buzzed violently on the couch. It was her. Before I tell you what she said, you have to understand the sheer chaos that was unfolding at that church. I braced myself for the worst and answered. "Carol." Sharon's voice was a frantic whisper. "You need to listen to me. The wedding. It didn't happen." My heart stopped. "What do you mean it didn't happen?" "It's over," she breathed, and I could hear gasps and murmurs in the background. "Michael called it off. At the altar." "Why? What happened?" There was a pause, and then she said the words that changed everything. "He found out. Carol, he found out about Tiffany. It turns out she's been cheating on him for months with her boss." My mind reeled, trying to process the information. Cheating. It was awful, but somehow it fit. But Sharon wasn't done. Her voice dropped even lower, filled with a sense of dread. "And Carol, that's not even the worst part. That's not why he really called it off." My hand tightened on the phone, my knuckles turning white. "What could possibly be worse than that, Sharon?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Money, Carol," she said, and the word hung in the air like a death sentence. "It was all about money." She took a shaky breath and started explaining, her words tumbling out in a rush. Apparently, the best man, a guy named Rick who had known Michael since kindergarten, had always been suspicious of Tiffany. Last night, after the rehearsal dinner, he got an anonymous email. It was from a disgruntled former employee at Tiffany's father's company. The email contained a series of documents, financial statements, internal memos, and a copy of a prenuptial agreement that made Rick's blood run cold. Rick stayed up all night verifying everything. Tiffany's family wasn't just wealthy. They were drowning in debt. Her father, a man who projected an image of old money and success, had made a series of catastrophic investments and was on the verge of total bankruptcy. Their entire lifestyle was a house of cards. And Michael was supposed to be their salvation. The prenuptial agreement they had pressured Michael to sign, claiming it was just a formality to protect their family assets, was a legal masterpiece of deceit. It wasn't designed to protect anything. It was designed to funnel his future earnings. As a rising star at a major law firm, Michael's projected salary and bonuses over the next decade were substantial. The prenup stipulated that a huge percentage of his income would be diverted into a family trust. A trust controlled not by Michael or Tiffany, but by her father. It was a meticulously planned financial siphoning scheme. They weren't welcoming a son-in-law. They were acquiring a cash cow. As if that wasn't enough, the anonymous source had also included photos. Photos of Tiffany with her boss on a supposed business trip to Chicago just 2 weeks prior. They weren't business photos. They were intimate, damning pictures of them kissing outside a restaurant, holding hands, looking every bit the couple Rick had raced to the church just minutes before the ceremony was due to start. He pulled Michael into a side room and laid it all out on a table. The financial records, the predatory prenup, the photos. Sharon said Michael just stared at it all, his face completely ashen. First he was in denial. But the evidence was undeniable, a cold, hard pile of treachery. He walked out of that room a different man. He went straight to the bridal chamber where Tiffany was waiting, radiant in her $1,000 gown. He didn't raise his voice. He just laid one of the photos on her dressing table. According to one of the bridesmaids who told Sharon everything, Tiffany's face went from bridal bliss to pure panic. She tried to deny it, calling the photos fakes, a desperate attempt to sabotage their happiness. But then Michael slid the copy of the prenup across the table next to the photo. "This wasn't about love, was it, Tiffany?" he asked, his voice chillingly calm. "This was a business deal." That's when she snapped. The mask of the perfect, sweet fiancé fell away completely. "You fool!" she screamed at him, her voice echoing through the church. "Do you have any idea what it takes to maintain this lifestyle? You should be grateful. I was giving you a chance to be part of something bigger." "Bigger?" Michael had replied, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "You mean part of your family's bankruptcy protection plan?" He left her there, shrieking, and walked directly to the altar. He stood before the 200 guests, the organ music fading into an awkward silence, and took the microphone from the pastor. "I'm sorry to have brought you all here today," he announced, his voice shaking but clear. "But there will be no wedding. It seems the union I was about to enter into was based on fraud, deceit, and a level of betrayal I didn't think was humanly possible." The church erupted into chaos. Tiffany's father started screaming, lunging toward Michael before being held back. Her mother began wailing theatrically. Sharon said it was the ugliest, most shocking scene she had ever witnessed. In the middle of it all, my son stood tall, broken but resolute. He had lost his fiancée, his future, his trust in people. But in that moment, in front of everyone, he had reclaimed his life. He had chosen truth over a beautiful lie. And I, his mother, had missed it all, sitting alone in my apartment, thinking I was the one who had been defeated. The call with Sharon left me reeling. I paced my living room, my mind struggling to assemble the shattered pieces of the morning. It was like watching a movie, something so dramatic and awful it couldn't possibly be real. My son, my kind, trusting son, had been the target of a cold-blooded conspiracy. And I hadn't been there to protect him. Around 3 p.m. there was a knock on the door. Not the loud, frantic pounding from Sharon earlier, but a soft, hesitant rap. I knew who it was before I even opened it. Michael stood on my doorstep. He was still in his tuxedo, but it was rumpled, the bow tie undone and hanging loosely around his neck. His eyes were red-rimmed and hollow, filled with a pain so deep it made my own heart ache in response. He looked like a soldier returning from a brutal war. We just looked at each other for a long moment. No words were needed. I opened my arms and he stepped inside, collapsing into my embrace. He held on to me with a desperation I hadn't felt since he was a little boy who had woken up from a nightmare. He was still my little boy. He buried his face in my shoulder, and I could feel his body shaking with silent sobs. I just held him, stroking his hair, whispering, "I'm here. I'm so sorry. I'm here." After a few minutes he pulled back, his face streaked with tears. "You knew," he whispered, his voice raw. "You knew what she was, didn't you? All this time." I led him to the couch and we sat down, my arms still around his shoulders. "I didn't know about the money, honey. Or the cheating. I swear I didn't." I took a deep breath. "But I knew she didn't respect me. I knew she didn't love you for the right reasons. I saw the way she looked at you. Like you were a prize she had won." And then I told him. I told him every last, ugly word Tiffany had whispered to me at the rehearsal dinner. About my role being over. About being unnecessary baggage. About how I should do everyone a favor and just disappear. As I spoke, a new kind of darkness crossed Michael's face. It wasn't just pain anymore, it was a cold, hard fury. He stood up and started pacing, running his hands through his hair in agitation. "I can't believe it," he said, his voice shaking with rage. "I let her speak to you that way. I let her make you feel that way." He stopped and looked at me, His eyes filled with a terrible self-reproach. When you weren't at the church. At first I was angry. I was hurt. I thought, how could she do this to me today of all days? He shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. How could I have been so stupid? He walked back over and knelt in front of me, taking my hands in his. Mom, it was your absence that made it all click into place. When Rick showed me all that stuff, my first instinct was still to protect her, to find an excuse. But then I thought about you. I thought, the most loyal, constant person in my entire life isn't here. And I knew something was fundamentally, horribly wrong. If Tiffany was capable of hurting you enough to make you stay away today, she was capable of anything. His words were a release. The guilt I'd been carrying all day, the feeling that I had abandoned him, started to lift. My staying away hadn't been an act of cowardice. It had been the final, crucial piece of evidence he needed. My silent protest had spoken louder than any argument I could have ever made. I should have told you sooner, I whispered, my own tears starting to fall again. I should have fought harder for you. No, he said, squeezing my hands. You did fight for me. Your whole life. I was just too blind to see who was really in my corner. He rested his head on my knees, just like he did when he was a boy with a scraped knee or a broken heart. What do we do now, Mom? I looked at my son, this brilliant, strong man who had been so terribly broken, and I felt a surge of strength I didn't know I had. The fear and sadness were still there, but underneath it all, a core of steel was forming. Tiffany and her family had underestimated me. They had underestimated my son, and they had certainly underestimated the bond between us. Now, I said, my voice clear and steady, we fight back. I truly believe the worst was behind us. The truth was out, the wedding was off, and we could finally begin to heal. But I had forgotten who we were dealing with. The Millers were not the kind of people to slink away in disgrace. They were fighters, and their weapon of choice was public opinion. The counterattack began 2 days later. It started on social media. Tiffany, a master of her craft, launched a campaign that was as brilliant as it was vile. She posted a professionally lit, black and white photo of herself, tear tracks artfully glistening on her cheeks, still in her wedding dress. The caption was a masterpiece of victimhood. My heart is shattered. On the day I was supposed to pledge my life to the man I love, I was left at the altar. I've learned a difficult lesson. Sometimes a man's love for his mother leaves no room for a wife. To all the women who have ever been made to feel second best by a possessive mother-in-law, my heart is with you. It was a nuclear bomb. Within hours it had thousands of shares. The comments section was a cesspool of outrage, all directed at us. Strangers from all over the country were calling me a monster, a narcissist, the stereotypical evil mother-in-law. They called Michael a mama's boy, a coward who couldn't cut the umbilical cord. Don't read it, Mom, Michael pleaded, his face pale as he scrolled through his phone. It's just noise. But it wasn't just noise. It was a carefully orchestrated narrative, and people were buying it. The story had legs. I went to my usual grocery store, and the cashier who had known me for years suddenly couldn't meet my eye. Women in my book club stopped returning my calls. It was like I had been branded with a scarlet letter overnight. The shame was suffocating, even though I had done nothing wrong. The campaign escalated. Michael's career, the one I had sacrificed so much for, became their next target. His law firm had several high-profile clients who were socially connected to Tiffany's father. Suddenly, one of those clients pulled their multi-million-dollar account, citing a lack of confidence in Michael's personal stability. A partner at the firm called Michael into his office for a chat about the importance of maintaining a pristine public image. The promotion he had been on track for was now in jeopardy. They were systematically trying to dismantle our lives piece by piece. They were poisoning my reputation in the community and kneecapping my son's professional future. It was a siege. Every day brought a new assault, a new whispered rumor, a new canceled lunch plan. One evening, about a week into this nightmare, I was sitting on my porch trying to get some fresh air when a car slowed down in front of my apartment. A woman I didn't know rolled down the window. "You should be ashamed of yourself," she shrieked, her face contorted in righteous anger. "Ruining that poor girl's life." She then sped off, leaving me trembling in the fading light. That was my breaking point. I went inside, locked the door, and just slid to the floor, my back against it. They had managed to turn me into a villain in my own neighborhood. They had made my home feel unsafe. When Michael came over later that evening, he found me still sitting there, just staring into space. He saw the look on my face and knew something else had happened. "What now?" he asked, his voice weary. I told him about the woman in the car. He clenched his fists, a muscle twitching in his jaw. "That's it," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "I've been trying to take the high road. I've been trying to just ignore them, hoping they'll go away. But they won't." He pulled out his phone. "We need to fight back, but we can't do it on their turf. We can't win a mudslinging contest on social media." He started typing furiously. "We need a professional. We need someone who deals in facts, not feelings." "What are you doing?" I asked. He looked up at me, his eyes blazing with a new cold determination. "I'm writing an email," he said, "to an investigative reporter I know. His name is David Chun. He specializes in exposing financial criminals." Michael paused, then added, "Because that's what they are. And it's time the world knew the whole truth, not just Tiffany's twisted fairy tale." The battle was about to enter a new, far more dangerous phase. Just when I thought the Millers had exhausted their arsenal of cruelty, a certified letter arrived. It was thick and official-looking, addressed to me. My hands trembled as I tore it open. The legalese was dense, but the words that jumped out at me were clear enough. Lawsuit, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and tortious interference with a contractual relationship. They were suing me. I sank into a kitchen chair, the papers rattling in my hand. They were demanding $500,000 in damages. $500,000. My life savings, the small retirement I had scraped together, wouldn't even cover a fraction of that. They claimed that my malicious actions in boycotting the wedding had caused Tiffany severe psychological trauma and had directly led to the dissolution of her valid marital contract. It was insane. They were blaming me for the fallout from their own daughter's cheating and their family's criminal conspiracy. They were trying to make me pay for the wedding that never happened. But that wasn't even the lowest blow. The true venom was saved for the second page. It was an attachment, a freshly printed article from a local tabloid, the kind you see at the supermarket checkout. The headline screamed, "Jilted Bride's Nightmare. Groom's Mom Has History of Pathological Jealousy." Sources say. The article was a disgusting character assassination. They had twisted my life story into something ugly and unrecognizable. They quoted anonymous sources who claimed I had always been unstable since my husband's death, that my grief had morphed into a possessive obsession with my son. They painted me as a sad, lonely woman who couldn't bear to see her son happy with anyone else. The reporter had even dug up my late husband's funeral notice, using my profound loss as evidence of my supposed fragility. They were using Mark's death, the most painful event of my life, as a weapon against me. That broke me. The social media campaign was one thing, but this was a violation. They had desecrated my memories, my love, my grief. I felt a wave of nausea and ran to the bathroom, retching into the toilet. When I came back out, shaking and pale, I picked up the phone and called Michael. "We have to stop this." I sobbed into the phone when he answered. "I can't take it anymore. Let's give them what they want. We'll make a statement, apologize, whatever it takes. I don't have the money for a lawyer to fight this, Michael. They're going to ruin us. Don't you dare talk like that." Michael's voice was firm, cutting through my panic. "This is exactly what they want. They want to scare you into submission. They want to bleed you dry in a custody battle over a future that never existed. This isn't a lawsuit, Mom. It's an extortion attempt." He was at my apartment within 20 minutes. The lawsuit papers and the tabloid article spread out on my coffee table. He read through them, his face getting grimmer with every page. "They're using a lawyer I know," he said, pointing to a name at the bottom of the legal document. "He's a shark, known for these kinds of predatory tactics." "Then what hope do we have?" I asked, my voice trembling. "He's a professional. I'm just me." Michael looked up from the papers, and the anger in his eyes was so intense it was frightening. "You're not just you, Mom. You're the victim here. And I am a lawyer. A damn good one. They think they can intimidate an old woman and her mama's boy's son. They've made a grave miscalculation." He stood up and began to pace, not with agitation this time but with purpose. They've given us exactly what we need. They've put their lies in writing. They've made formal documented threats. This isn't just a family drama anymore. He stopped and looked at me, a flicker of something new in his expression, not just anger but strategy. They've just declared a legal war. And they have no idea how prepared I am to fight it. They want to talk about lawyers and contracts? Fine. Let's talk. He picked up his phone. I'm calling David Chen back. He's going to love this. David Chen met us the next day at a quiet coffee shop downtown. He was a small, unassuming man in his 50s, but his eyes were sharp and missed nothing. He had already read the lawsuit and the tabloid piece. He didn't say much at first, just listened, taking notes in a small black notebook as Michael and I laid out the whole sordid story, from Tiffany's first condescending smile to the certified letter. When we were finished, he closed his notebook. This is a classic smear and sue tactic, he said, his voice calm and methodical. They create a public narrative that paints you as the villain. Then they hit you with a frivolous lawsuit, hoping you'll be too intimidated and financially drained to fight. They're not trying to win in court. They're trying to bully you into a settlement and a non-disclosure agreement. They want to buy your silence. So what do? I asked, feeling a sliver of hope for the first time. We don't play their game, David said. We changed the game entirely. They're attacking your character. We're going to attack their facts. We need evidence. Hard, undeniable proof. That night, my apartment became a war room. Michael brought over files from his office. We started digging. We went through old emails Michael had saved and we found it, a thread from 6 months ago where Tiffany was pressuring him about his salary, asking for detailed projections of his future bonuses, and questioning why he spent time on pro bono cases when he could be maximizing his income. It was cold, calculating, and all in writing. Then Michael pulled out the document that would become our silver bullet. The prenuptial agreement. He spread the pages across my dining table. I want you to read this clause, Mom, he said, pointing to a section deep within the document. I put on my reading glasses. The language was convoluted, but the intent was clear. It outlined the creation of the Miller-Davis Family Trust, and gave her father, Mr. Miller, sweeping unilateral control as the trustee. Michael would have been legally obligated to deposit a staggering 40% of his pre-tax income into it. He would have had no say in how it was spent. It was financial slavery disguised as a legal document. This is our weapon, Michael said, tapping the page. This is irrefutable intent to commit fraud. As we were working, the phone rang. It was my next-door neighbor, Mrs. Gable, a wonderful woman in her 80s who had lived in the apartment across the hall from me for almost 20 years. She had been a second grandmother to Michael. Carol, dear, she said, her voice crackling with indignation. I just saw that dreadful paper. The things they're saying about you. It's the most ridiculous nonsense I've ever heard. A possessive mother? You? I remember you working yourself to the bone so that boy could have a decent pair of shoes. Tears welled in my eyes. Thank you, Eleanor. That means so much. Nonsense, she said gruffly. Now I heard from Sharon that you're fighting back. Is there anything an old busybody like me can do to help? An idea sparked in my mind. Actually, Eleanor, I said slowly, there might be. The next day, David Chen sat in my living room with a tape recorder, while Mrs. Gable told him everything she knew. She spoke for nearly an hour, painting a vivid picture of my life as a single mother. She talked about the holidays I spent working extra shifts, the car I sold, the sacrifices she witnessed firsthand. Her testimony was powerful, not just because of what she said, but because of who she was. An impartial, respected member of our community. She wasn't just a friend, she was a witness. David left that afternoon with a briefcase full of ammunition. Tiffany's greedy emails, the predatory prenup, the financial documents from Rick's anonymous source, and a taped, notarized statement from Mrs. Gable that blew the possessive mother narrative to smithereens. They wanted to put your life on trial, Carol, David said as he stood at the door. Well, we're about to return the favor. He gave a grim smile. This isn't a family drama story anymore. This is a story about financial fraud. And that's a story that people pay attention to. The pieces were all in place. All we had to do now was wait for the bomb to go off. The article was published on a Sunday, the quietest day of the week, the one they would least expect. Michael brought over a copy of the Columbus Dispatch. It wasn't buried in the lifestyle section. It was on the front page above the fold. The headline was devastating in its simplicity. Beyond the altar, inside the financial deception that derailed a high society wedding. David Chun had crafted a journalistic masterpiece. It was cold, clinical, and utterly damning. He laid out the entire timeline, starting with the Miller family's staggering, previously unreported debts. He had pie charts showing their liabilities versus their assets. He had quotes from former employees who described Mr. Miller's desperate financial state. Then came the prenup. David had 2 independent legal experts analyze the document, both of whom called it unconscionably predatory and a clear instrument of financial abuse. He printed excerpts from Tiffany's emails, the ones where she fixated on Michael's salary and future earnings. He detailed the cheating, but he framed it not as a simple act of infidelity, but as part of a pattern of reckless and entitled behavior. He even included one of the less explicit photos, a blurry but undeniable shot of Tiffany and her boss holding hands, their faces close together. And then, like a finishing blow, he quoted Mrs. Gable. Her words were a warm, powerful testament to my character, a stark contrast to the cold, calculating portrait the article painted of the Miller family. Carol Oliveira sacrificed everything for that boy, she was quoted as saying. To paint her as some kind of monster is not just a lie, it's a sin. The effect was instantaneous and overwhelming. By noon, the online version of the article had become the most read story in the state. The comments section exploded. The tide of public opinion didn't just turn. It became a tidal wave. All the vitriol that had been directed at me for weeks was now aimed squarely at the Millers. So she wasn't a jilted bride, she was a failed gold digger. That poor man. And his poor mother. They dodged a cannonball, not just a bullet. Someone should investigate Mr. Miller for fraud. This goes way beyond a family squabble. My phone, which had been silent for weeks except for Michael and Sharon, started buzzing. Old friends from the hospital called to apologize for doubting me. Members of my book club sent texts expressing their shock and support. It was a deluge of validation so powerful it was almost dizzying. On Monday morning, Michael got a call from the opposing lawyer. The lawsuit against me was being dropped, effective immediately. There was no apology, no explanation. Just a curt, one-sentence email confirming the withdrawal. That afternoon, a partner at Michael's firm, the same one who had warned him about his public image, called him into his office. He had the newspaper on his desk. He looked at Michael with a newfound respect. "You handled this with incredible fortitude, son," he said. "The promotion we discussed. Let's make it official." It was a total absolute victory. We had not only defended ourselves, we had exposed them. We had used the truth as a weapon, and it had proven to be more powerful than all their lies and money combined. That evening, Michael and I sat on my little porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. We didn't say much. There was nothing left to say. The war was over. I expected to feel euphoric, triumphant. But instead I just felt quiet. It was the deep, bone-weary exhaustion of a soldier after a long and brutal war. We had survived. We had won. But the scars were still there. The fight had taken something out of us, and now, in the quiet aftermath, we had to figure out how to put the pieces of our lives back together, and whether they would ever fit the same way again. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, but it was heavy with everything that had happened. The battle was over, but the recovery was just beginning. In the weeks that followed our victory, a strange quiet settled over our lives. The Millers vanished. We later heard through the grapevine that they had sold their house at a loss and moved out of state, disappearing under a cloud of debt and public shame. The angry phone calls stopped, the judgmental stares in public ceased. The war was over, but my internal world was still a battlefield. I found myself feeling adrift. For over 30 years, my identity had been completely wrapped up in being Michael's mom. Every decision, every sacrifice had been for him. Now the battle to protect him was won, and he was a successful man busy rebuilding his own life. And I was left with me, a person I barely knew anymore. Some days were filled with a paralyzing anxiety. The tabloid article, even though it had been discredited, had left a deep wound. They had twisted my grief for my husband into a weapon, and it made me feel fragile, exposed. I found myself avoiding people, content to stay within the four walls of my apartment where it felt safe. One rainy Saturday, desperate for something to do, I decided to tackle the cluttered storage closet at the back of my apartment. Behind a stack of old photo albums and Michael's childhood drawings, I found it. My old wooden easel and a dusty box of art supplies. I hadn't painted since before Mark died. There was never time, never money, never energy. On impulse, I pulled it all out. I set up the easel in the corner of my living room, stretched a small canvas, and just began. I didn't think about what I was painting. I just let the colors flow. Swirls of dark blue and gray, streaks of angry red, and then a tiny defiant splash of yellow. When I was finished, I stepped back. It was a chaotic mess, but it was my mess. It was the storm inside me finally out where I could see it, and for the first time in months I felt a flicker of peace. Painting became my therapy. Every day I would spend an hour or two at the easel, translating my feelings into colors and shapes. It was a way of speaking when I had no words. My sister Sharon noticed the change in me. "You seem lighter, Carol," she said one afternoon over coffee. She was the one who suggested I join a support group she'd heard about at her church. It was for women who had experienced significant life transitions: divorce, loss, betrayal. The thought terrified me. Sharing my story with strangers? But I knew I couldn't heal in isolation. My first meeting, I just sat and listened, my heart pounding. Women told stories of cheating husbands, of manipulative family members, of losing their identities in relationships. Their stories were all different, but the pain, the feeling of being erased was the same. The next week I spoke. I told them everything, my voice shaking at first, then growing stronger with each word. When I finished, there wasn't pity in their eyes. There was understanding. A woman across the circle, whose own son had become estranged after a difficult divorce, looked at me and said, "You are a survivor." That word, survivor, landed in my soul and took root. I wasn't just a victim. I wasn't just Michael's mom. I was a survivor. The group leader, a compassionate therapist named Maria, took me aside after a meeting a few weeks later. "Carol," she said, "your story is incredibly powerful. The way you fought back, the way you used the truth. Have you ever considered using your experience to help others?" She told me about a mentorship program they were starting, pairing women who had come through a crisis with those who were still in the thick of it. The idea was like a light bulb turning on in a dark room. All my pain, all the ugliness we had endured. What if it could have a purpose? What if I could turn the worst experience of my life into a source of strength for someone else? I said yes. I started training, learning how to listen, how to guide, how to empower without giving unsolicited advice. It was challenging, but it felt right. It felt like I was taking all the broken pieces of my past and building something new and beautiful with them. One evening, I was on the phone with my first mentee, a young woman whose in-laws were trying to gain custody of her children through lies and intimidation. As I listened to her, I found myself saying the words I had needed to hear myself. "You are not what they say you are. Their cruelty is a reflection of them, not of you. You have a voice. It's time to use it." Hanging up the phone, I looked at the painting I had just finished. It was a sunrise with brilliant, hopeful colors spreading across the canvas. For the first time, I realized I wasn't just painting the storm anymore. I was painting the morning after. I was painting my own new beginning. A year can change everything. The raw, open wound of Tiffany's betrayal began to heal, leaving behind scars, yes, but scars that told a story of survival. Life settled into a new, peaceful rhythm. Michael absolutely thrived. He left the large, impersonal law firm and started his own small practice. It was a risky move, but his passion was palpable. His specialty, representing victims of financial fraud and manipulation. He poured all the anger and injustice he had felt into his work, becoming a fierce advocate for people who had been swindled and deceived. "Every time I win a case for a client," he told me once over our now sacred Sunday dinner, "I feel like I'm getting a little piece of our own justice back." He was turning his pain into purpose, and I had never been prouder. My own life blossomed in ways I never could have imagined. My mentorship work grew, and I started giving small workshops at the community center. My paintings, which had once been a private form of therapy, now covered the walls of my apartment, a vibrant testament to my journey. Then, one Sunday about a year after the wedding Michael called before dinner. "Hey, Mom," he said, a slight hesitation in his voice. "Would it be okay if I brought a friend with me tonight?" My heart did a little nervous flutter. A friend. I hadn't met anyone he was even casually dating since Tiffany. The ghosts of the past whispered in my ear. A flicker of the old anxiety. I took a breath. "Of course, honey. The more the merrier." That evening he walked in with a woman named Sarah. And from the moment she smiled at me, I knew she was different. Where Tiffany had been polished and cold, Sarah was warm and genuine. She was a middle school science teacher, and she had a kind, intelligent light in her eyes. She wasn't wearing designer clothes, just jeans and a simple sweater. She brought me a small potted basil plant for my kitchen windowsill. Dinner wasn't a performance. It was a real conversation. Sarah asked me about my nursing career. She truly listened to my stories. At one point, she noticed the large sunrise painting hanging in my living room. "Wow," she said, getting up to look at it more closely. "That's incredible, Carol. The colors. They feel so hopeful." "It's a hobby I picked back up recently," I said, feeling a blush of pleasure. "You have a real gift," she said, her admiration clearly sincere. "It feels like there's a whole story in that painting." She had no idea how right she was. Throughout the evening I watched her with Michael. There was an ease between them, a comfortable chemistry built on laughter and mutual respect. He wasn't trying to impress her, and she wasn't trying to change him. They were just two people enjoying each other's company. When she spoke, he looked at her with an expression I hadn't seen on his face before, not even in the early days with Tiffany. It was admiration. After Sarah left, Michael helped me clear the table. We worked in comfortable silence for a few minutes before he finally broke it. "So," he started, trying to sound casual. "What did you think?" I paused, drying a plate, choosing my words carefully. "She seems real, Michael," I said honestly. "The kind of person who sees what's actually in front of her." He let out a long breath he seemed to have been holding. A slow, genuine smile spread across his face. "Yeah," he said, his voice soft. "That's what I think too." He looked at me, his expression serious now. "Mom, I learned my lesson. In the hardest way possible. I know what the red flags look like now. I know that substance matters more than style. And I know to never, ever let anyone come between the people who truly love me." He met my eyes. "And that will always, always include you." That night, long after he had gone home, I sat in my living room and looked at my painting. The story it told was one of pain and struggle. Yes, but it was also the story of the beautiful, hopeful dawn that followed. My son was healing. He was happy. And I realized with a profound sense of peace that I was too. We had survived the storm, and now finally the sun was coming out. A few months ago, I received an invitation. A local nonprofit organization that provides legal aid to women escaping abusive situations asked me to be the keynote speaker at their annual fundraising gala. Me, a keynote speaker. The irony was not lost on me. The woman who had been told she was unnecessary baggage, who had been made to feel so small and voiceless, was now being asked to stand on a stage and share her story with hundreds of people. Of course I accepted. Tonight is that night. As I stand here behind this podium, looking out at all of your faces, I see a sea of stories. I see strength, resilience, and the quiet dignity of survival. My story is just one among many, but I want to share a piece of it with you, because I believe that in sharing our truths we find our collective power. 2 years ago, on the eve of what was supposed to be the happiest day of my son's life, his fiancée whispered some of the cruelest words I have ever heard. She told me, "Tomorrow your role is over. You are no longer part of this family." She intended for those words to be a verdict, a final judgment on my life and my worth. She wanted to erase me, to relegate me to the past, a piece of history to be discarded. What she didn't realize is that you cannot erase a person who refuses to be forgotten. For a long time, I believed that being a good mother meant disappearing. It meant sacrificing my own needs, silencing my own voice, and making myself smaller so that my child could shine brighter. I thought strength was about how much you could endure in silence. I am here tonight to tell you that I was wrong. True strength is not found in silent endurance. It's found in the moment you decide your dignity is not negotiable. It's in the moment you find the courage to say, "No, you will not treat me this way." It's in drawing a line in the sand and defending your own worth, not just for yourself, but for everyone who comes after you. The battle my son and I fought was not just about a canceled wedding or a financial scheme. It was a battle for our own narrative. It was a fight to decide who gets to tell our story. And what I learned is this: do not ever let someone else hold the pen to your life story. Do not let their bitterness, their greed, or their cruelty write your final chapter. That woman was wrong. My role was not over. In fact, a new one was just beginning. I am not a piece of history. I am a work in progress. And my story and your story is still being written. Thank you for listening tonight. My story has a happy ending, but I know that many of you might still be in the middle of your most difficult chapter. If you have ever had someone in your life try to diminish you, try to silence you, or make you feel like your role was over, I want you to share a few words of encouragement in the comments below. Let's create a space where every story is honored and every voice is heard. Let people know that they are not fighting alone. If my story resonated with you, please give this video a like and subscribe for more stories of strength and survival. We are so much stronger when we stand together.